Have you ever wondered if there are certain things you're doing as a homeschool mom that is actually not helping your family, that's actually making things worse or hurting your kids or your family's well-being overall? I've been in this homeschool thing long enough to know and to have had feedback long enough to know that I have. Not intentionally, wasn't doing things intentionally, but I discovered that indeed I did do things that hurt my homeschool family. And so today I'm going to chat with you about the 10 mistakes that I see homeschool moms make that can decrease their happiness, but certainly decrease their family's well-being. On this week's episode in the Homeschool Mama Self-Care podcast, I'm talking to Lee from Little by Little Homeschool, and we're both long-term homeschoolers, and we're talking about how our families benefited from this homeschool family life and also how they were disadvantaged. And so because I know from experience how some of these biggest challenges impacted my family, I want to be able to share it with you. And I hope that today it can help you to maybe fix some of these things and also decrease your sense of guilt, because we certainly as homeschool moms also feel false guilt for no good reason, but we just do. And so there are some things that we can just do to assuage that sense of guilt by doing something else. And P.S., if we haven't met, I'm Teresa Wiedrick. I'm the certified life coach and homeschool mentor and graduated homeschool mom of 4 kids here on the Homeschool Life Coach channel. You can also find me on YouTube, my podcast, all over the place. But every week, Tuesday at this time, 1 p.m. PST, I'll be here. If you've got questions or a scenario you'd like me to address, definitely put it in the comments below, and I'm glad to bring it to another Homeschool Mom Chat. But I'm so glad you're here. And whether you're joining me live or this is going to be a replay for you sometime when the kids are not around, I hope today's discussion can be eye-opening and helpful for you. I've got a guide right below me to help make sure that I stay on track as I'm chatting. So if you see me looking down, that's what I'm doing. So as a homeschool mom who has been through the ups and downs, my own personal story over the last almost 2 decades, I know how important it is to identify and correct mistakes, to have somebody that has been there, done that, be able to say, you know what about something else? What about focusing your direction in a different way? Or have you considered a different way to think about this thing? And I get the opportunity to chat like that with the moms in the Confident Homeschool Mom Collective every Friday. We have some fascinating conversations. They're very interesting conversations. I'll tell you more about some of our conversations in the stories this week. But here I want to talk about these 10 mistakes that many of us have made and how to avoid them, or how you could avoid them. Plus, by the end, I'm going to share an exciting opportunity to have direct coaching, via a live webinar this week on Friday, and then also how you can actually connect with me to do one-on-one coaching. So let's get into the mistakes. The first thing is that we tend to focus too much on curriculum over connection. So in the moment, I was as likely to do this as anybody else. In fact, the first 3 years I was remarkably focused on curriculum, trying to create my private school at home, trying to out-private school the private school. And though I do think resources, curriculum, all the things are useful tools, they're just tools. You could use any tools. I really believe that. You could use any tools. But there's really only one way to your child's heart. It is to listen and to connect. Intentionally try to connect with them. And sometimes when we're trying to complete the activities and check off our to-do lists and do all the right lessons or right activities with our kids, we lose focus on the most important thing, the connection. There is a homeschool mom influencer zeitgeist that says connection over curriculum. And that one is bang on. Connection over curriculum is the goal. The second mistake that we can make easily is to ignore child-inspired learning. Possibly more so if we have more than a few kids. You tell me what your experience is, but I think somewhere in our homeschool mama minds, we think that it'll be easier if we just do something one way. and we won't diversify the learning. We won't expand our educational approach beyond the one routine that we've created for all the kids. And yet, in my experience, though it appears to be so for our daytimer, that it would be simpler if we could just say, we're going to do this one thing at 10:45, and then we're going to do another thing at 11:30. Then we're going to have lunch, then we're going to have quiet time. Anyways, you know, the routine. It would appear that if we did it just one way, it would be easier. But in my experience, and the experience that I hear from others, is that it's actually easier to lean in to child-inspired learning instead of focusing on the way that you think is the best way to enact an education, to, enforce or enable the routine that you think is the best. So on one hand, yes, it requires a little bit more flexibility and really paying attention to your child. But also it makes it easier because you have less resistance when a child is actually naturally enthusiastic. So lean into child-inspired learning. The third mistake, and I don't think this is just homeschool moms. I think this is people in general in our culture, but it is definitely moms in general. It is that we are striving for perfection. We are trying to make it all right. We want to feel like what we're doing is enough. And I think that's a human challenge. Certainly as a human challenge, we find repeated in this Western culture that always says we need to do more and there's more, and did you see what other people are doing? They're doing more. And so we're always feeling this inner compelling that there's got to be more, right? And there is. That is one of the discussion points that Lee and I had on my podcast this week, the Homeschool Mama Self-Care podcast. It was that at the end of the day, you're not actually going to have everything done. You're not going to have finished all the curriculum. You're not going to have, done all the activities that you wanted to do with your kids. Ask me how I know, because I still have a load of stuff I would happily do with my kids. And most of them are almost all grown up. And you could always do more. Doing more is always a thing. Doing it perfectly could also be a thing. That's a really challenging energy to live under. But I'm going to say that it's even more challenging for the kids because a couple of possible reasons. One is that you're not really that available emotionally, mentally for them when you're so focused on doing the thing right. And also, you don't give them a lot of grace or space to do things their way or to make mistakes because you're not giving it to yourself either. So I could go into a full discussion on perfectionism because that's my story. But I'm going to move on to the next mistake that I see. We neglect to build a family culture around learning. We sometimes just get so focused on what we did or didn't do in the day, the day timer. We really aren't considering what is an education anyways. What are our values around education? What's our values in our homeschool family? What is the learning environment like? What traditions are we creating that create an energy or a culture around learning? So I shared with you in a post this week about kids learning to individuate. And, when kids get to whatever they are in your home, where they feel like they're kind of teenagers or adolescents, or they're moving into that energy, that's the time where you actually have to release them to do their thing. And to, as much as you're able, as much as you can bear, allow them to be fully them. And it's tricky. I mean, I don't know if you're there or if you've had that experience, but when, especially I think with your first, or the first child who is most likely to push back and say, I don't want to do it the way that mom and dad are doing it, or I want to do it a little bit differently, or I have ideas outside of the family. When you start hearing some of those things from your kids, you actually, I know from my experience, and I hear it from a lot of women, that it's really hard to hear it because you're like, but I'm trying to do the best. I'm trying to do right by you. I'm trying to do it the way that I think is the best way. And I'm your parent. And yet, for some odd reason I don't entirely understand, these people that are placed in our homes or in our arms they are meant to teach us stuff, not just for us to teach them. And we are here to learn alongside them, not just them learn from us. And so at that individuating stage, they tend to establish their sense of self outside of you. And you, at that point, when they begin individuating, that's when you get to reestablish how you're going to approach your family. You get to look at your educational values again and say, does it really align with my kid where she is or he is at this point? So I think the fourth mistake is that we neglect to build a family culture around learning, and we neglect to be flexible in it. So the fifth mistake that I see is that we're not addressing our overwhelm. It's like a rite of passage in this culture to say, I'm overwhelmed, I've got too much to do, it's too busy. Can we not? Can we not? I have. So it's not a criticism, it's more can we not elevate that? Because if we're not really enjoying our lives and feeling like our lives are lived intentionally, then what's the point of the hamster wheel busyness thing? If we're feeling overwhelmed, we got to do something about it. I've been there. So it's like no shade. I've been there. In fact, the third or fourth year was my hit the wall homeschool mom overwhelm experience. So much so that I wrote a book about it. That's why I began this entire coaching thing, because I kept sharing my story about how I overcome overwhelm. And now that I walk alongside homeschool moms all the time, the conversation is either about frustration or stress or overwhelm or burnout. Whatever it feels like for you, different people describe it differently. We don't have to live in overwhelm. We can do something about our experience of overwhelm. On Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, I'm offering a webinar specifically to address this. I'm going to give you 3 different tools or strategies to approach it. And then after that free webinar, you're welcome to join me. If you join me actually live for the entire time, I'm going to offer you the journaling workbook that my daughter and I just created about, I think it's titled Beyond You, or Beyond Homeschool Mom. Exploring you or something, but it's a journaling workbook about you getting clear on who you are outside your homeschool mom role and helping to foster your creativity, helping you to follow your rabbit trails, and you'll get free access to a digital download of that workbook if you're there live the entire time. And so you need to ask me for the webinar registration link. I'll get it for you. And then you're welcome to join us in the Confident Homeschool Mom Collective after the webinar, and we'll have a discussion about all these things. Because I don't think you need to live in overwhelm. Ask me how I know. I've got a lot of learning around that. The sixth mistake that I see that homeschool moms make that are to the detriment of their family is letting external criticism shake their confidence. I think it is a rite of passage for home educating parents to become really comfortable with their choices and confidently assert them publicly, because we don't have a choice. There's too much criticism. We either have to say, yes, I will do whatever everybody else thinks, and I will follow the crowd because I don't want criticism, which we all know you're not going to do. Or you could live in resentment against the voice, or we could live in resentment toward the voices that are criticizing and then secretly be frustrated by them, but not really, deal with them or do anything about them. And plenty of people do that. Or you could also be very reactive and create your 3-point essays in your head and then spout them off to the grocery clerk that's asking about why your child isn't in school. You could do that. Or you could grow in confidence as to why you're doing what you're doing. Get comfortable answering with those, frequently answered questions, actually come up with a plan to address them. And then ask yourself in your own private space, perhaps a journal, what do I really believe about this? What's my truth here? Am I worried about the same thing that other people are worried? Is it actually a concern for me? There's something about that doubt, living in a space of doubt and uncertainty, that actually negatively affects our kids. Instead of being secretly resentful and showing them that secret resentment towards the in-laws or whoever it is that's making us feel uncertain of ourselves. Or rather than showing them, frustration and reactivity behind people's back around the choices that we've made that other people don't like, we could show our kids that we're confidently asserting that this is how we're living. We're living differently. And we're okay that people think differently than us. We can respectfully engage conversations. We don't harbor resentment, but we do confidently assert that this is the best choice for us. So we can choose to do that. And I think it benefits our kids when we do. The seventh mistake that I see that we can influence our kids is fail to use journaling or reflection time. I think we need to create space in our weeks, or dare I say, every morning or every evening or sometime during the week, if you especially have little kids, sometime in the week to actually do a deep dive into what's really going on in here or here. Because if we aren't looking at ourselves as people on a growth journey and that we have things to learn over the course of time, we miss out on all sorts of growth opportunities, and also rendering stuff that has been in our mind for a long time. We can actually do something about those things. And when once I recall, and this is so long ago, I've been journaling forever, but I haven't always been journaling in a way that's trying to explore what's going on in here. When I began that journaling practice of really exploring, like, what am I feeling? What am I thinking? What are the thoughts behind the thoughts? Are there alternate ways of thinking about various things? If I write my thoughts every day, am I able to notice patterns of how I'm behaving or relating or thinking about things? And the answer is yes. You can identify patterns of what's really going on up here. And it's so freeing and releasing just by merely looking at the stuff that's going on up there. It teaches your kids how to engage the tough stuff in life. It's also just a really great way to put the challenges here on paper and then come into the present and be more present and be with your kids in deeper presence so that you're not mentally occupied. But it's just a great tool for them to learn anyway. That was the one thing that over our homeschool days we always did with writing or for writing was, did you do your journaling? I always included journaling. And even if they were super little, they could write pictures of how they were feeling. Or when they were older, they didn't have to write a certain amount. I certainly was not reading it. It was just, have you written how you feel or what you think about today or anything whatsoever, but to begin to develop a self-awareness approach for themselves. So the eighth mistake that I see that homeschool parents make and that is influencing their families is not creating a support network. There is something about this experience of home educating, even in this day and age where so many more people are homeschooling, that we tend to be an independent lot. And I am definitely one of those. Always have been. But I remember very quickly into homeschooling feeling like, ooh, no one's really supporting me here. And where's the people that are going to be, my support network? Can we meet on every Tuesday afternoon at a brick and mortar building and hang out with the kids and all these other families? And the way I was framing it actually sounded like I was like, where's the school? But I do remember thinking, where is the group? And sometimes there isn't an easy access group, or when you connect in with a group, you're like, yeah, but they're not my people. They're not my tribe. It doesn't feel like I can be my real me. I just remember, even though I didn't have a really strong support network in the early days, I remember that one homeschool mom who had a resource library. She had 5 kids, very busy, and she was solidly 10, 15 years ahead of me. And she had a child getting married, I think, at the time. And she wasn't someone that was just like me. She didn't think of the world the same way I did. She didn't parent the same way I did. She didn't homeschool the same way I did. But just getting to connect with her and talk with her about, like, what do you think of this? Should I use this resource? Or, I'm having this issue with my kid. What do you think about that? And she would just always be hopeful. And she pared things down. The things I was worried about, she wasn't worried about. She's like, that's okay. Now I get to be that person for homeschool moms, and I love being that person. I really love being that person. I get to do that every Friday in the Confident Homeschool Mom Collective, but I also get to be that, and even a much more deeper way, for a variety of different women in one-on-one coaching. And I love being able to provide that kind of community and connection, that kind of nurturing, the ability to teach them how to nurture themselves and address their challenges. I love being that person. But one thing I know is that loneliness doesn't have to be an option as a homeschool mom. Not anymore. Not in this world. Not anymore. In fact, last week, was it Thanksgiving? I can't quote exactly her words, but there's 2 moms that were sharing that it's really helpful to have this group where they feel like they can be their true selves. And I'm like, yes, that's what I want. May the whole world, the entire world of women, be able to fully give voice to who they truly are. And in this world of home educating mothers, all the more, because you are doing it for your children. So if you're doing it for your kids, you can do it for you too. So the 10th and final mistake, the ninth mistake is to fail to celebrate small wins. I think there's value in us actually looking at the things that are going right in our homeschools, not just the things that are going wrong. Every Friday, I make sure to create space to celebrate the small wins with the homeschool moms in the Confident Homeschool Mom Collective. If even just one thing in your journal every Friday, you can say what went well this week. It's beneficial for your brain. Our brains are naturally biased towards the negative, and we just need to notice the things that are going right instead of the things that aren't going right. Can I hear an amen? And the 10th and final mistake that I see is that we don't practice flexibility when we really have the opportunity to use it. We have so much freedom and so much potential to create a life outside the box. And yet, for bizarre reasons that I don't know, because I know it for myself, that it's easier, it has felt easier to stay within the box even when I went outside the bigger box. There's always another box that we can find ourselves in, and somehow the box feels safe. But if the box means that we don't have margins in our day and we aren't able to practice flexibility, then why a box? Why the box? I think we need to look at flexibility as a gift instead of saying something interrupted my day. So if you're feeling trapped by rigid routines, now's the time to move toward flexibility. So those are the 10 mistakes that I see homeschool moms make that really are disadvantaging their families, but also disadvantaging them. If you would like to join me on Friday in the free webinar that I'm offering, I'm calling it From Overwhelmed to On Purpose, then let me know and I'll grab you the link. So thank you for joining me today as we're exploring those mistakes and how to avoid them. I hope you found it helpful. And beyond the discussion on Friday, you're also welcome to join me in the Confident Homeschool Mom Collective right after that webinar, and we can have a one-on-one, or maybe not a one-on-one, but a group conversation in post-webinar discussion about that the webinar. And if you're interested in more personalized support, just ask me for a booking link and I can grab you the link so we can talk about one-on-one coaching and how that might work for you. And thanks again for being here. I'd love to hear who you actually are and the mistakes or the challenges that you see on repeat in your own homeschool. And until next week, I hope you have a lovely week. We'll see you soon.